Hello, everyone. This is Andrew with Bracken Clockworks here. Today I'm doing a bit of an impromptu TikTok video. The reason for this is a question I get asked quite often in the day-to-day operations of the shop that I'm working at is how on earth did you get into this this line of work, as far as clock repair? And I thought, I do get asked this quite often, so I thought, I'll make a video in case any of you were curious at all and how I got into this, and maybe some of you have a similar story. But mine came quite by accident, as I'm sure most people, in this field have gotten into it just by accident. My uncle by marriage, my uncle Bruno, he was a clerk at a bank for many years. He got into clock repair as a side gig. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why are you talking about your uncle? Well, because he used to repair clocks, he used to make them. And so for years growing up, we had this one clock in our living room, which ended up eventually becoming the dining room clock. It was a simple wag on the wall or free swinger Westminster chime Hermla clock. And I was always fascinated by it. And, it just really caught my attention in a way that I never expected, or, I don't know, call it just weird quirk that I had. I don't know. But I've always been rather mechanically inclined. But anyway, I grew up seeing this clock and always wondering how the heck the darn thing worked. So fast forward a few years, and I'm in my early teens, probably around 12 or 13. And I once asked him, at a family function about, how does he go about, repairing clocks and this and that. And he said, well, that's a lot to get into, but, it's really a nice side gig that I do, and it's really fun, and, it takes a long time. It's not an easy thing to do, but, if you have patience, you can succeed at it, and I'm like, okay. So then about a year or two later, I said something to him again about it. And so then, we had a very similar conversation, almost identical. Well, then I was around 14 or 15. I think I was 15. He sent me a box in the mail. It's just randomly showed up, and inside were 3 books on how clocks work and how to service them, as well as a old Hubert Hare cuckoo movement. And he gave me a couple of, just basic hand tools, like a pair of pliers, couple screwdrivers, hemostats, things like that. And he said, he just wrote a quick little note in there. He said, here, this should help you get started and answer any of your questions. Enjoy, is basically what the note said. And immediately I was intrigued. And so I looked through the books. I didn't really, of course, read them at first because, who immediately dives into reading? So, the first thing I did is I went in, looked at all the pictures and photos and little diagrams, and I was like, okay, this is just what I needed. So I looked, and then finally, of course, I read through each of the books, and some of the stuff in there was way over my head, even after reading the first book in the series. So I started into, tearing apart that cuckoo movement. And boy, I had such a fun time learning on that. And it was a good movement to start with because, one, it's cheap and it's simple. And two is it's just a good starting point. There's no springs involved. You don't have to worry about hurting yourself or, anything like that. It's very basic, and simple. So that was pretty much my introduction to clockmaking or repairing or smithing or whatever you want to call it. And the next project I worked on, well, let me back up a little bit here. So before I even got into clocks in general, I was a woodworker and still consider myself one. And I used to build shelves, even small cabinets, things of that nature. So then I thought, I've always wanted to build a clock. I wanted to be like my Uncle Bruno, in that sense, and build my own clock. So then after some convincing with my father, we finally decided, okay, sure. Now, mind you, I'm pretty young at the time. I'm still like around 14, 15. And so then we get down to, finding a good plan. We made one and then sourced a movement from a local clockmaker. And, it was really nice. It turned out pretty good. It wasn't perfect, by any means for a first time, but it worked, and it's still working today. As a matter of fact, my brother has that clock and he loves it. It's a wonderful timepiece. He absolutely loves that thing. But anyway, so then moving on, I got into more building the clock, the cases and things like that. And then I came across this book by John Nelson. Well, actually, my father did. He found it through one of the clock suppliers. I think it was S. LaRose at the time. Some of you may even be familiar with LaRose. And it had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful information in there about how these clocks were built with plans of antique clocks. Almost all of them are American clocks. Beautiful drawings, beautiful plans, well laid out, easy to follow. And we made several. I mean, probably close to 30 or 40 clocks between the two of us. We kept some, we gave some away, and they're not cheap because the movements that were in them were, decent movements, and or at least we tried to keep them decent. At the beginning, we were using some, we'll say less than stellar movements, but then some of the plans called for the dimensions of the plans wouldn't allow for modern movements to fit in the case. So that's where things started to get a little bit interesting. So I wanted to build this one clock, and it was called a column clock or a half column clock. And some of you may know what that is, but Seth Thomas made them and other companies too. But in this plan book was a plan for this clock, and it's a weight-driven OG style movement where you have the movement and then there's a cord from each train. So you got your strike train and your time train reversed if you're watching the video, but how I look at it. And then it goes up into the case to wooden pulleys and then down the inside of the case, just like your typical American OG case. So working on that, I thought, I really wanted to put an original movement in here. So I got a hold of Merit Antiques. Now, some of you probably know who they are. And I actually called them and I said, hey, because I knew that they had some from one of the catalogs that they had released. Anyhow, I got a hold of the guy that was in their shop. I can't remember his name offhand, but I asked him if he had any Seth Thomas OG movements in stock. And he said, I don't think so. He says, but I'll tell you what, he says, I'll look for you, and if I find one, I'll send it to you. And I said, yeah, cool, thank you. I'll also need, a suspension rod and a pendulum and weights and all that. And he said, well, they actually come with those. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So then fast forward, about a week, and in the mail shows up, and wouldn't you know it, he thought for sure he didn't have one, but he did. He did have an original Seth Thomas OG style clock movement in there, and everything was there with a little note. He said, good luck with your project. And I thought that was a really nice touch. So that's the one I ended up fixing. And it was the first one that really got me into understanding how clocks really work. Those are very simple, even simpler than cuckoo movements. They're much, much simpler. And so then, by that time I had already amassed, a fair amount of hand tools and things of that nature to be able to work on them. But there was one thing that I did not know about yet, and that was bushings, how to really, really, really overhaul a clock. But I knew how to clean them, and, I knew how to assemble them correctly and, make them work. So in a way, I was kind of a hack at that point, So anyway, built the clock, put the movement in it, and you know what? I'll be darned if the thing ran great. And I mean really, really good. And I was very surprised and very happy. So anyway, then, well, it kind of goes all uphill or downhill, depending on how you look at it from there. started getting more interest in it, acquiring more tools, more in, watching videos. I had no formal training with this work. And in the way I see it, I guess you could say I'm still in training. And any clockmaker who says that they're not still learning is lying, in my opinion. This is a field where you're constantly picking up new techniques, new ways to do things. And it's really a fascinating experience and a fun pastime, hobby that you can speak with other people about and get their insight and, take pieces and bits of their knowledge and incorporate it into what you're doing. And that makes it really fun because now you have that access to ask somebody a question. I get questions all the time. There's some people who they get a hold of me immediately, if they're having some sort of a problem. And I always try to answer them as quickly and as concisely as possible with any questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'll say, I don't know. You know what? That's a really good question. I'll look into it and I'll get back with you. Or I'll say, hey, you know what? I know somebody else who would know the answer to this question. Let me refer you to them. And then after you talk to them, tell me, what they had to say. And then we'll both learn from it. So it's really a nice study, in how people do things. And I will never, ever, ever claim to be an expert in this field. I've been doing this for 21, almost 22 years. I am in no way an expert. I'm always a student of clocks or horology, as the term is for this. And it's really a lot of fun, and also quite frustrating. You have good days, you have bad days, and that's just kind of how it is. But, at any rate, so getting back to my little story here, which is now turning into a 15-minute ramble. Fast forward a few years, and I'm, off and on kind of working on stuff, doing my own projects, collecting my own clocks, still building. But usually what I was doing is what I did with the other one, where you buy, you make a clock and then you buy a old derelict movement off eBay or something, fix it and put it in there, So that was really kind of fun. Then after a while, I learned about bushings. And once I learned about bushings and what they did, I was like, mind blown. That's when the light really came on. And I'm like, okay. And by that point, I was in my mid-20s. So I went on eBay and I found a Kendrick and Davis bushing machine with the KWM reamer set. It was a complete set. The only thing it didn't have was bushings, which, that's fine. So I went and got those. And that was the game changer right there. That's what really got me into the actual overhaul process of a clock. And once I taught myself, basically, after watching a couple of videos, I just had to try it. I'll tell you, a side note, I have broken more movements and parts than you could ever imagine. But I'll tell you what, it hasn't happened very much lately because I learned from my mistakes. Mistakes are the greatest teacher in this field or in any field, really. Mistakes help you get through life. So at any rate, that's enough with that. So then that's when, with the bushing machine, that was the game changer. So fast forward a few more years, and then in 2021, or 2020, 21, after doing this on the side and just making a little money here and there, and even doing some of the videos that you've seen on here, I got hired at a local shop, and I worked there for about 2 or 3 years. And basically, it gave me more of an immersion into the process, and where I was able to, again, ask questions, get answers, but I pretty much kind of hit the ground running. And, the managers and, the owner were very impressed, with my knowledge and what I was able to do. And honestly, when I first started, I thought I didn't know anything. I thought me joining this was like joining the elite group of people who knew everything. And it turned out that I wasn't very far off from where they were. And that surprised me. I didn't realize I was that far advanced. I thought I was just a kid, in that sense. A couple years went by and, things kind of changed, and, my thinking kind of changed as far as, how I wanted to go about this. And I decided that it was time for a move. And that's when Lakewood Clock Repair was born. It was not my brainchild, I will admit to that. That's the current owner. It was something he had been thinking about for quite some time, and we actually met through the other shop, and we kind of hit it off, as far as friends. And so then that's when, things really started to roll, in that respect there. Yeah. So then we got Lakewood Clock Repair going and off the ground, and it's been going very, very well. We're still in the early stages, but everything looks pretty darn good so far. We're getting a lot of repeat customers, and not with the same thing. It's usually a matter of people getting a hold of us that have more than one clock. So they bring one in just to see if we know our stuff. And then that's when they call and they say, hey, I've got 2-3 more to bring in for you, And so that's kind of what did it for us. And it's a shame that there's not more shops doing this. It really is. But it is such a wonderful, rewarding job. It's like our motto for the shop is, we bring your clock back to life. And that really encompasses how I've always felt about, redoing a clock. It's basically bringing something back that was once not working, like not like dead, in a sense. And it's so rewarding. And the other thing that is rewarding is the look on the customers' faces when they see their clock. We get it all cleaned up for them, and, everything's working, and they get to hear that sound again. And they always would say, this is what it sounded like in my mom's house, in my grandma's house, or grandpa, or, great grandpa in some cases. And it's just really rewarding to see that. And there's no going back for me as far as doing something else with my life. I am now fully 100% dedicated to this craft. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's a really wonderful experience, and I'm so glad that I get to share it with everybody here and with everybody that I meet, that comes into the shop. They're always so awestruck by what it looks like in there, with all of these clocks on the wall. And a lot of people think that we're selling clocks. Well, yeah, we have a couple. I think we have 4 for sale right now, and they're all used. And they were donations that we fixed and we sell them, and that's about it. But there's, probably about 65 or maybe even 100, at a time, clocks either on the wall, on the shelf, in the back, and they're all being worked on. They all have our white tag on them. And customers always, is this a sale tag? Oh no, that's a repair. And they go, you mean all these white tags are repairs? Yep. Wow, you guys get a lot of work. So it's really, it's been a really rewarding experience, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And I'm happy to bring you along with me on this journey. And I hope to continue doing this for many, many years, and hopefully nothing happens to keep me from doing that. So, but anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that that there wasn't too much rambling here, but it has been a very fun time, in the last 22 years of doing this, and I hope to make it last another 22, maybe even longer than that. So, but anyway, thank you for your support and, your following, subscribing. If you haven't yet, go ahead and hit the button. But yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you about this, and means a lot to me, that you're here. And, if you're seeing this, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And I enjoyed making this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as I had making it. So take care now. Bye-bye.